And now we'll discuss SA 620 using the work of an auditor's expert. That is the expert that was employed by the auditor. He's not employed by the management. If it's employed by the management, it is management expert. Okay. And with that said, first we'll see the objectives of the auditor with regards to SA 620. First thing, what he has to do to determine whether to use the work of an auditor's expert or not. We have seen something similar to like this, right? While using the work of internal auditors or while using the work of management expert also, first he have to determine whether he could use that or not. It depends upon that, and whether that work was adequate for the audit purpose or not. Similarly, all the 600 series talks about that. First, the auditor has to determine whether he could use that work, whether because it's a question like whether the internal auditor or the other auditor or the auditor's expert here as having that integrity or competence, or they are having any kind of ethical requirements and all. We have to check for that. And after that, the work, whether it would be adequate for our audit purpose or not. And this is generic. And the auditor shall not refer to the work of the auditor expert in unmodified audit report unless required by law. You see, whenever auditor is giving a clean report, then he need not refer the auditor's expert name. If at all he is giving a qualified opinion or something, he could refer the auditor's expert name, but that does not diminish, that does not reduce the auditor's responsibility for that opinion. Okay. When giving a clean report, he need not refer auditor's expert name unless required by law. And if he is giving a modified opinion, that's qualified opinion or disclaimer of opinion or an adverse opinion, he may refer to the auditor's expert name, and that reference would not reduce the auditor's responsibility for that opinion. And now we'll see what are auditor's responsibility, what are his responsibility, his objectives, what is responsibility, why the auditor had got. He had went to form an opinion on the financial statement. You see, auditor has the sole responsibility for the audit opinion expressed, and the responsibility is not reduced by the auditor's use of that auditor's expert. That's what we have discussed in the summary, right? That thing. If the auditor, if you see, if these all the things that were in colored could be asked in as a direct question. Even if you don't remember this precise, you see, in that hurry, we don't find audit is, I think, as per all the subjects, audit is a lengthy subject, which for which the time wouldn't be sufficient. And moreover, for the standards on auditing, what do? We usually put it at last, right? For that, if at all you have, might have not read all the PDFs with regards to this, which you have taken printouts or not. If you don't have, at least read the summary portion. If you read the objectives itself, it would be you're half done with the standards of auditing. Okay, you're half done with the, if you know the objectives of the auditor, and that's it. Okay, this is what we are talking about in the summary section. That summary section is that important. And if the auditor concludes that the work of auditor expert is adequate for his purpose, he may accept the expert findings and conclusions. That is the second objective. When he found that audited expert's work is adequate, then he might use the expert's findings and conclusions. Then that's his responsibility. And with regards to the agreement, like any agreement, see the agreement with regards to the engagement, like an engagement or audit report. I'm sorry, engagement letter of engagement. It's kind of agreement between the management and the auditor, right? How we define the terms of that. First thing, what it has to contain responsibilities of both the parties and the work they were doing, what with regards to the work, like the scope and within what time it has to be completed, or whether any kind of format that has to be given as per the laws, or any kind of reporting framework or etc. And these were the things. And we'll see with regards to the agreement between the auditor and auditor's expert, the nature and scope and objectives of the work. Okay, work and the respective roles of the auditor and the expert. Two things done. And third one is the nature, timing, extent of the communication. How to communicate. Okay. And the need for the auditor's expert to observe confidentiality requirements. You see, the communication was also used in SA 600 with regards to use of the other auditors' work, right? There also we have come across this point. So whenever they were agreeing to the work, or whenever two people were coordinating, we also have to determine the way of communication, and that's it. And you see, that's normal way how do we behave in our usual day-to-day life, that's the thing, but using some specific words here. In usual terms, we don't use nature, timing, and extent and all. We'll just the way of communication. For this examination purpose, in order to get marks, these were the keywords to just put these phrases to gain you marks. That's it. And the need for auditors expert to observe confidentiality requirements and confidentiality requirements also. Two things we have already known, and the special things that we have to remember is the communication that we have seen as per SA 600, and the confidentiality requirements. And okay, and evaluating the adequacy of the auditor's expert. What is the objective of the auditor? To evaluate whether the work of auditor's expert is adequate or not. How would he do that? He would evaluate that adequacy by the relevance and reasonableness of findings and conclusions, relevance and reasonableness of the assumptions that were used by the auditors, relevance and completeness and accuracy of the source data. This is a direct question you have to remember. This is similar to that we have discussed earlier. Relevance and reasonableness of the findings and conclusions, relevance and reasonableness of the assumptions and the method, relevance and completeness and accuracy of the data. Whenever we find data, what we have discussed earlier, the adjectives that have to come with regards to the data is either sufficient or appropriate if you're as an auditor, with regards to the depending upon the situation, and completeness and accuracy. And with regards to the types of the reports or opinions auditor can obtain from the expert or for the audit evidence, that is they're talking about the scope in which he could use the auditor's expert, that is with regards to an evaluation of all the assets and liabilities, and including impairment assets and business combinations, and any kind of actuarial calculations with regards to insurance contracts, any kind of estimation of oil and gas reserves. Okay, oil and gas reserves estimation, because it's something that was very different from the auditing perspective, right? Auditing field. And valuation of some environmental liabilities and cleanups. You see, all these were something that related to the natural resources, environmental, and interpretation of contracts and laws and regulations. What the thing first? What does financial statement contain? These two things, right? Valuation of complex assets and liabilities, and actuarial calculation of insurance contracts, estimation of oil and gas reserves and environmental liabilities, etc., setup clean costs, these regards to the environmental things, and interpretation of contract laws and regulations. If you categorize these things, it is very easier for you to write it in examination than remembering all the 5 individual points. And analysis of complex or unusual tax compliance issues, etc. And with that said, we have completed our SA 620 also.